In Dry Prong, Louisiana, a woman finds herself with an unpleasant job to do. And it's going to be messy. She's no stranger to tough situations. Money problems and a sick mother-in-law can be heavy issues to navigate, especially alone. But when the brand new love of her life goes missing, everyone's looking for answers. Exactly what happened may be revealed by performing a very unusual task. Which will only take her 1 hour. Dry Prong, Louisiana. It's a small, close-knit community where everyone knows each other from school, work, or church. No matter who you are, you can go to a neighbor to ask for help, and they will give you the hand you need, readily offering assistance when it comes to borrowing tools for household maintenance. Unfortunately, that kind of unconditional kindness can bring out the worst in some people. They can't help but take advantage of another person's good nature and generosity. To them, kindness is a sign of weakness. And once they identify a person as kind, their selfish desires take hold, and their actions, over time, can escalate into something far worse. In some cases, it can even lead to murder. Ann Findlay has a history of using others for her own gain, constantly finding herself on the wrong side of the law. Warnings and time on probation don't seem to have had any effect. She can't stop taking advantage of people. In April of 2001, she's charged with identity fraud and is sentenced to 1 year of hard labor. Perhaps this is what she needs to get her life on track. When her time is up, she heads to Dry Prong, Louisiana, where she has family residing. Dry Prong, Louisiana, named for a water wheel that came up dry in the 19th century. Home to less than 500 people, and just 20 minutes from the larger town of Colfax, life is quaint, quiet, and calm. It's the perfect place to come to if you need a fresh start with which to raise a family in peace. And Dry Prong is home to Barbara Smith.
Barbara Smith moves back home to Louisiana after the death of her husband when she's 31.
Barbara manages a bakery for 24 years before retiring. By now, she's well-liked in the community, known as a hard worker and a devoted mother.
While two of her children, Dennis and Kimberly, go off into the wider world, her son Heath stays in Dry Prong and cares for her in her elderly years.
He spent the last 15 years working as a skilled mechanic at an auto body shop. He stayed single as he takes care of Barbara, but that's never seemed to bother him. Much like his mother, he's well-liked and respected in the community. They're hardworking, humble people who have a quiet life.
In fall 2003, Love seems to find Keith while he's at the local bar.
He meets Betty Ann Findlay, and there's an instant spark. It seems like they're destined to be together for the rest of their life.
Betty has a knack for chatting people up and engaging in the kind of neighborly niceties that small towns thrive on. And today is no different. When her chainsaw isn't working, she goes to a neighbor and borrows one from them.
Betty has family in the area as well, and she and Keith spend a lot of time together. It isn't long before they start talking about moving in together.
For the people around Keith, it's a happy sight to see him find someone who clicks so well with him. In February 2004, Keith and Betty move in together after a few months of dating.
It's exciting for Keith's family. He's not a perpetual bachelor anymore, and he's actually found someone who's happy to help him take care of Barbara. They seem to be well suited for each other.
Betty's grateful her neighbor is willing to help her out, but that doesn't mean she wants him, or anyone else for that matter, prying into her business. One thing many people with a history of trouble with the law have are feelings of distrust for others, something that stays with them even after they change their lives. As with all couples, however, problems come up and need to be dealt with. A new relationship is exciting, but it comes with challenges, especially when the care of an elderly family member is concerned. It's a lot of work, a lot of stress, and money will always be something to worry about if you aren't wealthy enough to not have to think about it.
Money is light, and work at the shop is sparse, so Keith needs to find another form of income.
However, as time passes, there's some concern for Keith's situation.
Nine months after Betty moves in, police receive a call from Keith's uncle, Billy Nugent. He hasn't heard from Keith for 3 weeks, and he's worried.
A question is now on everyone's mind. Where is Keith? And has something happened to him? Betty has a secret. She hasn't turned over a new leaf in Dry Prong. In fact, she's worse than ever. Over the course of an hour, Betty Ann Findlay is going to do things not even the devil himself would expect. Barbara Smith lives in retirement in Dry Prong, Louisiana. Her son, Marlon Keith, takes care of her while working in a local auto body shop. Helping Keith take care of Barbara is his new girlfriend, Betty, who he started dating earlier in the year. Things are good, but struggles soon find them. With money a growing concern, it becomes apparent that Keith needs additional work. But Keith has stopped contacting family, raising concerns.
Keith's uncle Billy tells police that he hasn't heard from Keith in 3 weeks.
Keith's family wants to know if there's a reason he stopped contacting them. Or frighteningly, if something has happened to him.
To follow up, police contact Betty for an explanation. Betty tells police that since money has been a concern lately, Keith has taken a job in New Mexico doing some construction work to earn a supplementary income. She says he normally calls on Wednesdays, and as far as she knows, he's doing fine.
There's several ways to report the missing person aspect. One is a concern that they're not where they should be, and you'd like it checked out. Then there's the official point where it's actually a missing person and we know something has happened to them and something has to be done. This isn't at that point yet. It's just a point of interest for the person saying, I don't know where he is. With the reason given for Keith's disappearance, there's no reason to file a missing person report yet. He's supposed to be somewhere working, therefore they're waiting to confirm if that's true or not. There would be different circumstances to make your determination of what you're to do. If you have something giving you an indication there may be something else going on, you would just put it in the back of your mind or put it on your desk or in the computer and flag and say, I'm going to watch this one and I want to jump on it now or a little later. You don't have to do anything to tell the family or the person. You can do an investigation on your own if you think something is up. So they get an idea that this may have more to it than meets the eye.
Billy still has a bad feeling in his gut that something is wrong.
Billy agrees to wait for the day of Keith's next call, since Betty has said that she'll ask Keith to contact him. He decides to trust her and be patient.
See, this case is extremely complex from the family sense. You've got a family member that's concerned, and the police are suspecting a family member may be involved. So you've got a duality of information occurring and a separation of the facts. Good police officers will pick up on that very quickly and know we have to watch this case.
Billy has more to tell the police, and what he says is disturbing.
Billy tells police that Barbara has been experiencing mysterious health problems since Keith disappeared, so much so that he's acquired power of attorney over her estate.
Power of attorney is a legal capacity granted to a person who is close to a vulnerable person when that person can no longer make decisions about their own medical or financial needs on their own. If a person becomes suddenly mentally incapacitated, for example, they're in a coma or they've had a stroke, something like that, and they're unable to communicate, basically, it's much more easy for a family member or a close person to get power of attorney. On the other hand, if a person is developing dementia, they're making poor decisions, things like that, a family member might have a bit more difficult time getting power of attorney, especially for financial reasons.
Over the course of an hour, Betty Ann Findlay takes steps to ensure Keith is never found. As Billy has been checking on Barbara daily, he recounts the events of the past month to the police. He begins by explaining Barbara's mysterious affliction.
In late fall of 2004, Barbara develops symptoms after Keith disappears. She all of a sudden has trouble walking, she's slurring her words, and has great difficulty speaking. After watching her for some time, it becomes apparent that she's only getting worse. The family decides they need professional help, and they take her to the hospital.
This is a difficult decision for the family since they're already struggling financially. If they're willing to face medical expenses, police know it has to be serious.
Billy brings Barbara to the hospital where they run a battery of tests, but strangely, none of these tests are conclusive. And while she's in the doctor's care, her symptoms actually begin to improve.
This is very confusing for the family, but when Barbara recovers and has no further symptoms, she ultimately has to leave the hospital.
Barbara goes home and is taken care of by Billy, Betty, and her sister Carol, who is married to Billy. It's a relief to be home, even if her affection was confusing and frightening.
However, after a short time of being home, Barbara's symptoms return. This is very concerning, and she has to be treated again.
Barbara returns to the hospital and recovers again.
Doctors decide to run a toxicology screen, and they finally find a reason for Barbara's symptoms. There's a high level of opiates in her system. Strangely enough, though, none of Barbara's current medications contain opiates.
As a 71-year-old woman, the level of opiates in her system is indicative of someone who is abusing drugs or taking them unknowingly. Barbara's family suspects that Betty is involved at some level. The police are already on this to some degree. Unknown to the family, Betty is under police scrutiny, not for the poisoning of Barbara, as one might think, but for something completely different.
Betty doesn't know police are digging into her past, but she doesn't have time to worry about that anyway. Right now she has a job to do, one that requires just the right tools. And she has to work fast if she hopes to complete it before her hour is up. In the wake of her son Keith's disappearance, Barbara Smith has been repeatedly falling ill with mysterious symptoms. A toxicology report shows that high levels of opiates are in Barbara's system. The family suspects Betty, Keith's girlfriend, of being responsible for this. Detectives are already on Betty's trail. However, for a criminal history no one knows about. What could have been found in Betty's past to raise such concern among the police? More worryingly, is she truly a threat to Barbara? Little do they know, Betty is far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined.
There's been reports of bad checks in Barbara's accounts. And when they look into Betty, they find that she has a history of writing bad checks and fraud of many different types.
Keith, for his part, was never aware of this when he met Betty or during their relationship.
Billy takes Barbara to her home to take care of her. It's reported that Betty tries to come and see her, but Billy doesn't allow it. Strangely enough, Barbara's symptoms completely disappear and she starts to improve.
Barbara goes to the police once she's recovered her checkbook. They find that someone else has signed her checks, so obviously someone's been stealing from her.
The family also thinks that Betty's responsible for Barbara's sickness.
The theory is that Betty has been poisoning Barbara's tea to hide the fact that she was stealing checks from her.
Betty's old fraud habits are rearing their heads again. Police are determined to find out if there is any connection to Betty's history of check fraud and what's happening with Barbara's accounts.
This would be concerning to the police, as it raises questions about whether Betty, if she's capable of poisoning Barbara, what could she have possibly done to Keith, and they start digging further into this file.
The day Betty said Keith would call Billy comes and goes. It's agreed that it is time to officially file a missing persons report to investigate Keith's disappearance.
Now that the missing persons report has been filed, it gives the police the ability to dig deeper into the missing person and more details around this family.
After a subpoena, Betty's phone records are pulled for an examination.
The phone records show that Betty never received any calls from New Mexico, where Keith was supposedly working. This proves she has now lied to the police and lets them focus on her as a possible suspect. This would raise a very large question with police as to where is Keith's body and what has happened to him.
Now that police have evidence of wrongdoing in lying to detectives, it's time to investigate Betty more thoroughly as part of the missing persons report.
4 days after Betty's records are pulled, an anonymous tip comes in about a possible gravesite to examine, a gravesite that's very close to home for Betty.
This tipster leads police to a hole in Betty's backyard.
Additionally, a witness brings in bloody pillowcases that they saw being removed from the home. This is potential to be damning evidence.
After securing a search warrant, police attend the residence and knock at the door. There's no answer. They could have forced their way in, but they were polite and knocked again.
Police arrive at Betty's residence to conduct a search, but she initially doesn't appear to be home.
Betty shows up at the door and says she was in the shower. But police know her hair is dry. There's no indication she was in the shower, which should show she's lying again. So they do a meticulous search of the house, documenting everything they see and searching every room. When you catch someone in a lie the first time, you have to really be careful, because it can take you, if you're too quick, down the wrong path. But it's a lie. It gives you another reason to seek another lie. At 2 lies, you now have a pattern and something to go on. 1 lie could have been a coincidence, it could have been an accident, but 2 lies make it a case.
It turns out that the tipster was right as well. There is a strange hole in the backyard.
The detectives find a hole, and within it is a very foul odor coming from it. Also, there's pieces of hair, it appears, as well as a buried extension cord.
Betty tries to explain this by telling police that Keith killed a dog and must have buried it in the backyard.
While the police don't have enough evidence yet to arrest anyone for the disappearance of Keith, they do have enough evidence on the fraud and the poisoning to make an arrest.
On December 7th, 2004, Betty is arrested on 16 counts of forgery.
With Betty in custody, this gives the police two safeguards. One is they can investigate Keith's disappearance, and second, it assures that Barbara probably will not be continued to be poisoned.
It's a good thing that Betty has been arrested and kept away from Keith's family. Because unknown to them and to the police, Keith has been dead for weeks. Betty is responsible for his death and the disappearance of his remains. It takes her 1 hour to go through a horrific process. Following the disappearance of her son, Keith Smith, Barbara Smith has been experiencing mysterious medical symptoms. A toxicology report reveals that someone has been giving her high levels of opiates that have been putting her in and out of the hospital for weeks. That someone is Betty Ann Findlay, Barbara's missing son's girlfriend. While Barbara has been sick, Betty has also been forging checks and stealing Barbara's money. After lying to police about where Keith is, Betty is arrested for 16 counts of forgery against Barbara and taken away, leaving only one question: where is Keith? Unbeknownst to investigators and Keith's family, Betty has killed him and disposed of his body in places unknown. With her in custody, will cops be able to expose the truth?
After Betty's arrest, police are visited by her sister Janet. She provides some information to them which she says is relevant to the case, and they have to investigate.
Janet tells police what Betty has told her, that a man named John killed Keith and took away his body.
Janet identifies John to police as Betty's ex-boyfriend.
So with this potential lead from the sister, police decide they have to now interview Betty and get her side of the story.
Detectives arrange a meeting in prison with Betty to get her account firsthand and hopefully learn what happened to Keith. Betty tells the police more about what happened that fateful night, the last night she saw Keith alive. She alleges that on that same evening, her ex-boyfriend John turned up at their door unannounced, storming into the house and demanding she give him the money she supposedly owed him. Betty says she refuses and tells John to leave.
When Keith attempts to intervene and Betty tries to go for her phone, John and Keith struggle and Betty hears a gun go off. She hurries back and finds that Keith has been shot, so she leaves the home in a panic.
Betty says she fled the house to hide in the woods for hours until John and his black Jeep had left their property.
She returns to the home and finds that Keith's body is missing. She alleges that due to her being afraid of what might happen to her or the rest of her family if she comes forward, she kept quiet. With such serious allegations, police need to speak with John immediately.
Detectives go to John and ask him about Betty. He claims he hasn't seen her in years. and he didn't even know that she was in Dry Prong.
Police then tell him about Betty's allegations against him, and he's baffled. Detectives ask what kind of car he drives, and he says a white pickup.
John explains that he actually drove a black Jeep years ago when he dated Betty. However, he wrote it off in an accident, and once he proves this to the police, they now have caught her in a second lie.
The detail provided by Betty to police about seeing John's black Jeep the night of Keith's disappearance pokes a hole in her story. Likewise, no claims of John's abuse were able to be substantiated by investigators. Her credibility is waning. The human body contains 5 liters of blood. Betty Ann Findlay had under an hour to clean the horrific mess.
Days later, Janet returns to the detectives after visiting Betty in prison. She has a set of keys with her, which she claims are evidence. Janet begged Betty to stop lying to the police, and in response, Betty gave her a ring of 3 keys leading to a storage locker where Keith could be found.
Janet is shocked. There's no way that Betty should have these keys. They're smuggled into prison, and she immediately tells the police. Smuggling things into prison is not as easy as one would think, but it is if you have someone on the inside that has taken a bribe or turning a blind eye. In the days of old, people would throw footballs over the wall into the rec yard. They would take drugs out of it. Women would smuggle things in their internal body cavities and get away with it. There was lots of ways that things were done. They've tried to clean it up, but still things get in the prisons. Usually it's through human error on the inside. While speaking with detectives, Janet receives a call from Betty, and she advises her right in front of the police what storage unit to look in.
Betty tells her to look in Unit 124, which she rented under the name of Mary Trent. Investigators go to inspect Unit 124, but even before they open it, there's that telltale smell.
After securing a search warrant, police enter and find black garbage bags in a pile.
Within the storage unit, they find human remains that have been cut up and placed in several garbage bags. Later, those remains are determined to be those of Marlon Keith Smith.
With remains discovered and evidence of her other crimes in the hands of the police, will the lies Betty has spun around herself be able to protect her from the rapidly enclosing justice? Marlon Keith Smith has been murdered. An investigation into the poisoning of his mother and the theft of her money has spiraled into a full investigation of his murder. The murderer, Keith's girlfriend Betty, tries to pin the killing on her ex-boyfriend, but investigators have ruled him out. At her sister's urging, Betty has given detectives the location of Keith's remains, which have been cut into many pieces. Will all the lies around Betty Ann Findlay protect her? Or will justice finally be done for the theft from Barbara Smith, the poisoning of Barbara, and the murder of Marlon Keith Smith? After cutting Marlon Keith Smith's body into pieces, Betty Ann Findlay packaged his remains into plastic garbage bags. She's been careful to keep the house as clean as possible. Betty needs a break from all the work she's done over the past hour.
One of the sad duties of a police officer is having to tell the family when something like this happens. And with the confirmation that he is now dead, someone has to make a trip to the house and tell the family what has happened to Keith. It would depend on the police department. Some of them have units, victim services units, that you take with you to do the notification. They're more compassionate to the situation, able to spend time with it. If you're a police officer, you usually go and make the sad notification. Are you the mother of or the father of or whatever? And you tell them, sorry to tell you that your loved one has passed or something of that nature. They break down. It's usually a very traumatic moment for them. They don't remember anything what you've told them after that. You still have to possibly do an identification of the body and things like that. It's not pleasant for the police, and it's really, really sorrowful for the family. Each situation is different on its own. If it's expected, if it's a senior, if it's something along that line, well, they might be aware it was coming. When it's an infant or a young person or a spouse, depending on the age, it's just horrible. You feel it, you feel empathy, you feel sorrow, you feel all of the things that go with that. But it's never something you look forward to doing. You do not want to ever have to do that. You go home yourself at night, you can't sleep, you wake your children up and hug them. Upset my wife quite a few times in the middle of the night because I'd come home and couldn't sleep because of what I'd had to tell a family earlier in that day.
This is an enormous loss for Keith's family. He was a devoted and caring son, a well-liked and decent man within the community. To know that this happened to him at the hands of someone so close to the family is devastating.
Taking a load off for a couple of minutes has some unintended consequences. Betty ruins her pillowcases with Keith's blood. The same pillowcases later noticed in the trash. After the remains are discovered, a neighbor of Betty's comes forward with evidence for investigators.
Detectives learned that at some point after the killing, Betty had borrowed a chainsaw from the neighbor. When the saw was returned, it had apparent bloodstains on it. The police now seize this and pursue evidence.
While the pieces of evidence are unsettling, they are individually circumstantial and not definitive at this point.
Under warrant, police take several items and samples of evidence from Keith's home, including sections of carpet that they want to test for DNA or any other type of evidence.
Police also learn from another one of Betty's former boyfriends that she had given him a handgun. The ex-boyfriend's story was that Betty claims she had given him the gun so it would not endanger her grandchildren.
Police talked to Betty's adult children who claimed to have no knowledge of their mother's actions.
Betty's son, however, saw her remove a chunk of carpet and wonder why she threw it away.
After her short break, Betty gathers all the pieces together to get rid of them.
In addition, lab results are in from the shallow grave found in Keith's backyard. The hair samples there appear to be of human origin. It looks like somebody tried to bury Keith there.
Each piece of evidence that we've discussed on its own would not probably result in a conviction. But when you put all the circumstances together, mesh all of the evidence, in all probability, you will get a conviction in court.
Betty finally agrees to tell the police the truth, so they go to talk to her again. Betty tells police that Keith found out about her stealing checks from Barbara and confronted her in a rage. As the argument intensified, she claims Keith went for a gun and she lunged at him.
The gun goes off by accident and kills Keith. As a result, Betty claims to have lost her senses and stayed with the body for days, eventually trying and failing to bury it in the backyard. After this, she claims to have cut up the body and stored it in Unit 124. While it seems like a closed case, Betty still tries to evade justice for Keith's murder.
After this confession, Betty pleads not guilty, which is very strange. Even though she's confessed, she pleads not guilty, but it's within her constitutional right to do so.
Doctors testified that even though she was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, as well as anxiety and depression, none of these conditions exempt her from moral responsibility for the crime.
Betty finally accepts a plea bargain, pleading guilty to manslaughter, attempted murder of Barbara through the poisoning, fraud, and many counts of obstructing justice.
In the end, Betty Ann Findlay is convicted of second-degree murder and is sentenced to 48 years hard labor. She appeals the decision, but it is later affirmed.
While Keith Smith cannot be given back to his family, and their loss cannot be healed, some solace can be found in the knowledge that his killer was found out. While the hurt of his death and Betty's betrayal, the family remains, some comfort can be found in the fact that she will never hurt anyone again. In a small community like Dry Prong, Louisiana, the efforts of a concerned neighbor can offer evidence to ensure such offenders are brought to justice.